Convidados, muito boa tarde. Vamos dar início a esta sessão da tarde. O programa está ligeiramente atrasado. Tudo será feito para acertar. O momento que se segue agora vai falar a partir da Itália o professor Gianluca Misurraca, do Politécnico de Milão. Vai ter uma intervenção de aproximadamente 15 a 20 minutos e, se houver espaço, teremos uma sessão de perguntas. A seguir ao professor Gianluca Misurraca, vamos ter a sessão número 2, que vai discutir sobre internet e computação na nuvem. Gianluca, hello?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you may start from now. 15 to 20 minutes maximum.
Okay, I cannot open my video, but okay, I'll try to share my slides. Let me see if I manage. Okay. Sorry, I don't see the slides.
You have the permission. You may go. Yeah. You have the permission to share your screen. You have the permission to share your screen. Try it again.
Yes. Okay, now should be working. Can you see them, right?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you. Good luck.
Okay, thank you. Bon dia. And sorry for the misunderstanding of the timing. I guess there was some problem. Let me just set the clock, so I try to be quicker than I was told. But okay, so well, very pleased to be with you, although not in person in Mozambique, in Maputo. So thanks to Lorino Cimane for the invitation. And here, okay, I won't go much into detail, but you know, my perspective, as you will see, is very much focusing on you know, how innovation and ICT-enabled innovation can support the process of public sector reform, and also having a foresight perspective. That is what I've been let's say, looking at most of my career, both in academia and also working for the European Union institutions and the United Nations across my career. So, I mean, I'm sure you're all aware that you know, artificial intelligence, although not being something really new, is now became somehow the new normal, or at least people think this is the new paradigmatic shift, and the you know, changing everything in our life. This is actually already happening somehow in general, for the good and the bad in a sense. But also when we look at this from a public sector perspective, we notice that there is a lot of hype. Everybody now is talking about AI, otherwise it would not be trendy, let's say. On the other side, there is a lot of potential, but in reality, there's still a very little understanding, also from a research perspective, with very limited focus on you know, how AI is used and what are the impacts in the public sector. So in this respect, while working for the Joint Research Center of the European Commission in Seville, where I'm based in the south of Spain, actually we set up with colleagues an observatory for artificial intelligence in Europe and for Europe, so also looking abroad. And in particular, I was looking at the use of AI for the public sector, in fact. And in this sense, I mean, I was first of all leading a team to try to analyze what is a map of what is the real use and applications of AI in public services across the EU member states, and trying also to develop a methodology to assess what are the real impacts, so that we can shape a roadmap for using these technologies in the public service. So I won't go much into details, but just to also clarify, and without entering into the debate on the definition of AI, that is of course something still unclear to many. Even the experts do not really agree on what we should mean by AI. So in our case, to avoid this, we actually looked at it from a functional perspective, so a very pragmatic approach. And somehow, apart from the three main categories of perception, reasoning, action, we actually derived the typology of these applications from the cases we actually collected in the public sector in the European member states. This is the report that last year I led author for the GRC, and where we collected over 200 cases in the EU 27 member states, plus Switzerland, Norway, and UK. And of course, it's not, let's say, a statistically significant representation of the reality, as we don't really know the universe under investigation, but really it is significant as it is in fact was the first, let's say, reservoir of knowledge, if you want, of this kind in Europe and also worldwide, as there are very few attempts yet in this endeavor. So now coming quickly to the key findings and the results. So despite the big hype that we have seen that I mentioned before and that we see every day, actually the use of AI in public services we found is still, I would say, rather basic. So there are not many applications that mainly dealing with general public services. In some cases, using some of these technologies, chatbots or predictive analytics or expert rule-based systems, but not yet, let's say, exploiting the potential of putting all these methodologies and technologies together. That is actually the real power of this ensemble of techniques. And so in practice, these results often mean just an incremental change and not really deep reforms or changes in the routine or in the practices that we have in the workplaces. And in many cases, we'll be back on these, there are, basically the focus is more on the data part, on the data analysis, and not much on the real, let's say, delivery of services. So in many cases, it's mainly pilot solutions that are not yet necessarily institutionalized or mainstream. Another analysis we did, borrowing a classification from colleagues in the US that also ran a similar exercise in the US public administration, looked at what is the purpose, what is the scope of these applications. And here again, we see, at least in our sample, that, as I said, is limited, but still give quite a picture of what's happening in most European countries, is that mainly we see these technologies used to support the service provision and somehow the engagement also of citizens through chatbots or even matching services, for instance, for unemployed or in social services. On the other side, we see also some uses of these technologies to, for instance, support detecting fraud or make personalized services, of course, with all the risk that this has, and we will see, but also for internal management, and a bit less on real decision support systems for gaining insight for better policy making, for instance, or in the adjudication part, let's say the full automation of the services, so to grant formal benefits or rights to citizens. So this is yet not fully developed. On the other side, we see the potential of this technology in public services in really changing. So I won't go in details, but apart from the example that we see use of incremental innovation, or some cases of applications that can, uses of AI can actually change organizational processes through robotic process automation, for instance, or some more sophisticated use of chatbots, for instance. We see that there are some attempts, at least some pilots or plans for really disruptive or radical innovator in the public sector. And this is already in some countries, although, as I say, not fully implemented. Now, another issue that we need to consider when we talk about AI in and for government is the role of the government itself, because of course the government has a multi-dimensional, let's say, activity, is not only a user of technology, of course, that is more and more trying to adopt these technologies to improve the processes and the service delivery, but it's also a regulator, so it should also set the rules for the others to use these technologies, and somehow is a facilitator, as it could be a platform for by opening up public sector data, for instance, but also stimulating GovTech, so working in partnership with the industry and the civil society organizations. So here, and again, I won't go much into the details. So we see, let's say, stylized, let's say, the definition of the function of government, that AI can improve policy making and the regulatory processes themselves. There are several cases, mainly at city level, but also in areas that are, let's say, not the core of the public service, like, for instance, in agriculture, with the system, satellite systems, for instance, in Estonia, that detect the wood grass of farmers, or try to understand what is the feeling, the perception, the sentiment of citizens through social media, so that decision making can be improved, but also monitoring and evaluating the impact of specific policies. On the other side, and this is an area where, more at the core of the public administration, clearly there is the possibility to use data and artificial intelligence to improve internal operations of the government, and these in many areas, from human resources management or other financial and other resource allocation to specific public procurement processes and dedicated services that include the need to detect anomalies, for instance, in the virtual systems or in the sharing of data, for instance. And here we have some example of some countries. All these examples are either in the report I published or in new reports of the GRC that has been just published last this month. So on the other side, on the other let's say on the other hand of the policy making chain, there is the possibility also to improve massively the delivery of public services. So not only providing better information to the citizens, but also exactly somehow automating the service value chain, if you want, and also develop completely new services that would not be possible to imagine without having these technologies. And clearly, on the positive side, there is the aim or the hope that this could also improve trust and reduce corruption, for instance, by empowering both the civil servants and, of course, the citizens in better understanding the data, establishing a real-time relation with the government, between government and citizens, and so forth. Now, if we then look, try to make a reality check, at least in Europe, by looking at the strategies that in the first wave in 2020 were already adopted, about 15, I would say, we see that, however, there are many good intentions, so especially in trying to stimulate awareness, strengthening the data management, building capacity, and also developing some specific ethical and legal framework, especially for data governance and the use of algorithms. But on the other side, if we somehow want to use a metaphor that is used in a public policy, let's say, circles, I would say, in academia at least, we see a lot of, let's say, a lot of sermons, but not much of carrot and sticks, in the sense that there are many approaches that are focusing on, for instance, on data access, on improving the quality of data and the algorithms, but it's not yet clear to what extent these are really contributing to AI adoption. And also, we don't see really a lot of funding and regulatory frameworks that can improve this. So there's a lot still to be done. Of course, now in the new AI coordinated plan, there are more advanced, more sophisticated approaches that probably could help this and the adoption of AI, including a specific program that the Commission, the European Union, is developing on adopting AI. Now, just to conclude this part and quickly, we see a high level of heterogeneity of the use of AI. Everybody is somehow looking for searching for the Holy Grail. So what is the best practice, the success story to replicate? But we see somehow that many, and it's very difficult to go beyond the piloting syndrome, I would say. So we need to really make sure that there is an institutionalization of AI into mainstream services. Also, we see we need to do much more research, better understand what really works, also through something of regulatory framework, for instance, let's say, Europe, AI. Of course, humans, especially in humans, especially we need to safeguard that the technology is really security, and also somehow questioning fundamental democratic principles. So somehow this was already anyway implicit in the use of AI systems. So the COVID-19 somehow exacerbated this. Somehow already in many public sector applications of AI. So just to summarize, we see a potential for, of course, using this technology to improve quality of public services, but we have many risks, like probably you are aware of the risk of discrimination by default, that bad quality of data could have and actually intensify social prejudice, but also the fact that we often don't really know how the algorithms are developed and so forth. So we have to make sure that actually we don't use this technology in a bad way, and basically the consequences will bring us into even more dystopian future. So there are no shortcuts, of course. We cannot just handle in a superficial way the ethical aspects of technology and artificial intelligence in general. This is not a panacea. Of course, we have to adopt a public value perspective, so trying to look at the complexity and embracing actually the complexity of these systems in the public administration. But also we have to be ready for disruption. So we have to experiment with these technologies, knowing that this may change even our cognitive routine, let's say, working practices. And for this, we need to design new models of governance. So really rethinking our own, the entire process of public administration, I would say. With this in mind, I just conclude going back to Europe, or coming back to Europe from beautiful Maputo. And here in Europe, there is ambition of the current Commission von der Leyen to make this Europe's digital decade. And on this, to this end, there has been an ambitious plan that focuses on three main pillars: on data, of course, on human-centric artificial intelligence, and developing the digital infrastructure in Europe, but also linking Europe with the rest of the world. Now, this vision, of course, is specifically important when it comes to artificial intelligence, because in April this year, after many other, let's say, policy and regulatory and let's say documents, has been the proposal of the AI package. So a proposal of a regulation on AI that is based on the risk-based approach, but also the coordinated plan on AI I mentioned before that actually tried to put all member states of the EU in a coordinated approach make sure that exactly actions are taken at the regional European level and can increase the leadership of Europe on for a more inclusive and trustworthy AI. And to this, I'm also pleased because I have the honor to lead this initiative that, in short, we call the IntouchAI.eu, that is the international outreach for human-centric AI, so an initiative of the European Commission to promote this, the development of a shared approach at the global level, supporting policy dialogue, technology diplomacy, but also strengthening research activities across different regions in the world, but also working in particular with like-minded countries and relevant international organizations and stakeholders. And just to conclude, not to make publicity to the master I'm also directing, but also that brings me back to the past times in Switzerland when, in fact, with Lurino, Lurino was also part of the Master on Electronic Governance I was leading at that time. And we just launched earlier this year a new master that is funded by the European Commission. It's called AI for Gov, so it's a master on AI for public services. And these, I'm just mentioning because it shows the importance to have, functional specialists in this field. So not only people that understand the technology, so the AI, but also are fully aware of what are the public sector peculiarities and specificities. So on this, and with the idea that this will be a pilot to develop further training, executive training and initiatives, not only in Europe, but also around the world, I will just conclude and thanking you. So obrigado, and here you have also my contact, and just say that we are just at the beginning of this dive into the future of digital transformation. So thanks. I hope I've been within the time, and of course, if there's any question or comment, I'll be pleased to answer or listen. Obrigado.
Thank you, Gianluca. Alguma pergunta aqui na sala? Alguma pergunta? Gianluca, I don't know if you can access the chat. There is a question from the chat. Have you seen the question there?
Yes, I see a question from Herman Ramos. Since many countries are advancing in AI in comparison to others, increasing technology innovation, how can we avoid using systems that have not been audited for accuracy? Well, this is a very good question. So actually, I would say this is at the core of the debate on what we call the human-centric approach to artificial intelligence, because of course it's first of all an issue of data accuracy, data quality. I mean, what kind of data we are feeding, with which data we are feeding the algorithms themselves, how the algorithms are designed. So definitely this is something that is currently being addressed. From the EU perspective, I don't represent the Commission anymore, but I mean what you can see in the regulatory proposal that has been advanced. This is clearly not an attempt to regulate the technology. This would be naive, I would say, and is rather an approach to a proposal to regulate the use of specific technologies and the specific uses in risk areas. And in that sense, it's very important that we pay particular attention to the data that we use in areas like law enforcement, for instance, or health, or areas that are really impacting and can be very dangerous for the citizens' health or their specific rights.
Thank you.
And so maybe just to complete on this, so one of the options that is now being developed, for instance, in Europe, is to create registries of algorithms also and applications, and this can be shared, for instance, among cities or different government agencies, so that they can also exactly look better and audit with some either self-evaluation, but also with some ex-ante assessment what is the algorithm's accuracy.
Obrigado, professor Gianluca. Se não houver mais perguntas, passamos para a sessão 2.
Ok, obrigado. Vai.
Obrigado, professor. Mais uma vez, boa tarde. Passamos para a sessão 2. A sessão 2 é Internet e Computação na Nuvem. Penso que muitos podem estar na mesma dúvida que eu tenho. Quando se fala de guardar a informação na nuvem, eu me pergunto, mas qual das nuvens? Porque eu vejo muitas nuvens e há dias que o céu está totalmente limpo, nem há nuvem nenhuma. Depois ficamos na confusão de se a nuvem moveu-se para um outro lado e se os dados também foram para este lado. Ok, mas o objetivo deste painel é discutir a questão da computação na nuvem, a internet e a computação na nuvem. Como é que nós em Moçambique estamos a acompanhar este progresso tecnológico, promover um debate que discute essencialmente sobre a acessibilidade, inclusão e cobertura dos custos da internet, partilhar a informação sobre as boas práticas é uma das coisas que vão ser discutidas aqui, mas essencialmente quais são os desafios que nós temos para armazenar a informação ou armazenar os dados na nuvem, a que custo nós guardamos a informação lá, que implicações é que nós temos da migração do armazenamento tradicional em servidores para ir guardar os dados na nuvem, quais são os desafios para a criação de políticas, o que é que nós achamos do ponto de vista de políticas, regulamentos e por aí em diante, na área das TICs podem ser colocadas para permitir que este novo paradigma seja uma realidade. Para discutir este tema, vou convidar, penso que vão entrar remotamente parte dos membros deste painel. O moderador vai ser o Dr. Tailor e tem como membros do painel Gordon Bailey, que vai falar de Palo Alto dos Estados Unidos, Dr. Amratal Nahur, da Oracle, também dos Estados Unidos, e o professor Marcelo Guanaz, daqui de Moçambique, que por acaso estivemos juntos durante o almoço. Portanto, é com eles que vamos falar a partir de agora, por cerca de aproximadamente 1 hora, a partir deste momento. Terminando este momento, tal como vem sendo, vamos ter uma sessão de debate e discussões e vamos depois ter um intervalo para o café. Vamos voltar a servir um café quando forem mais ou menos 3:55. Voltaremos à sala em 10 minutos para ver um vídeo da BDQ e depois vamos entrar para o terceiro e o último tema do dia, que vai ser acesso à informação na internet. Volto a repetir, neste momento temos sessão 2, internet e computação na nuvem, moderador Dr. Tailor Moore, membros do painel Dr. Gordon Bailey, do Palo Alto, nos Estados Unidos, Dr. Amratal Nahur, da Oracle, nos Estados Unidos, Dr. Marcelo Munguanaze, daqui de Moçambique, quadro sénior do CUIM. Dr. Munguanaze, por favor. E queria pedir ali à equipa técnica, não sei se conseguem conectar. Então peço, se possível, que os ponha, pelo menos o moderador.
Good afternoon, and welcome to today's panel session on the
Sim, mas ele não fala agora.
cloud computing.
Bom, queria pedir então, autorizar que a partir de agora ponha o moderador, o Sr. Tailor Moore. Obrigado.
Thank you very much. I am Tailor Moore, the Commercial Counselor for the United States Embassy in Maputo. I'd like to thank the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Higher Education for their invitation to moderate this session. Once again, I'm pleased to be joined by Mr. Gordon Bailey McEwen, Cloud Security Specialist at Palo Alto, Mr. Amritlal Nawar, Director of Technology Solutions Engineering for the Middle East and Africa for Oracle, and Dr. Marcelo Munguanaze, Director of the ICT Center at Eduardo Mondlane University. As part of our housekeeping, I would like to ask the panelists to keep their mics muted and cameras off when not speaking. To begin, I'd like to ask our panelists to present to the forum. You will each have 10 minutes. First up, I welcome Gordon from Palo Alto to take the microphone. Thank you. Seems that we're having some technical difficulties with Gordon's microphone. Could the host please unmute Gordon?
Dr. Gordon, we're having issues here to hear your voice.
Yeah, I think that he needs to be unmuted by whoever's controlling the technology, whoever's controlling the host for the session.
There we go. Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Okay.
You may proceed. We can hear you. You may proceed. Thank you.
And I think, Gordon, one second. I think given the problems that we're having with the microphones, once we're unmuted, just leave yourself unmuted so we don't run into this issue later in the session. Thank you.
Yeah, all good. Thanks very much, Taylor. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for your attention today. My name is Gordon Bailey McEwen. I'm a cloud security specialist working for Palo Alto Networks. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about cloud security automation. So just as we get started, I was kind of thinking back to the early days of cloud, where public cloud, specifically where AWS and Azure were kind of starting out, and the way that people would traditionally start to spin up infrastructure in the public cloud would be to log into the GUI, or the graphical user interface, which obviously is web-based. So they would go to the AWS console or the Azure console or whatever it was, and they would start spinning up infrastructure. You know, they would start creating their own VPCs and their EC2 instances, and create their own subnets and routing tables, all those kind of things. And it was that's how people started to learn in the public cloud environment. And that was a really good way to get a grasp of how to configure infrastructure in the cloud. But unfortunately, it wasn't the fastest way to do it. So it was a great way to learn. But then people started to see we need to get faster at doing this. And, you know, spinning up infrastructure using the GUI is not a particularly speedy way of doing things. So then they transitioned to using the CLI tools. So as an example, AWS CLI or the Azure CLI, all the cloud service providers offer CLI tools in order for you to interact with them. So people started using the CLI tools to get faster at spinning up this infrastructure. And that was really, really good. Some of them even started scripting. So they started running scripted CLI commands in order to spin the infrastructure up in a better and a quicker way. And then, of course, that evolved even further. And now we've got full-out infrastructure as code languages. So, I mean, you know, things like CloudFormation templates have been around for a while. Azure's got ARM templates. And there's various sort of even agnostic, so cloud agnostic languages, things like Terraform and Pulumi. And these kind of things have all evolved over time with the objective of, you know, automating our cloud environment and making it really, really fast. Now, that's a really, really good thing. We need to automate our cloud in order to have true agility. We can't be sort of moving at the speed of humans. We need to move at the speed of machines, and automation is the way to do that. Now, in a similar way, if you consider application development, which is what this slide is really on, we've also moved from a traditional waterfall model into sort of more an agile methodology. We've moved from monolithic applications with thousands of lines of code into smaller applications or microservices that all just talk to each other using APIs. We've moved from batch releases, so, you know, a software release that comes once every year or 6 months, into more DevOps releases where things are happening almost, you know, a couple of times a day if you really want to, in terms of DevOps. And from this custom environment into a more sort of common cloud operating model. So it's not just that cloud automation has moved on, application development has moved on as well. And it's all with this objective to business agility. We need to move fast in order to keep up with the competition. We need to move fast to be able to respond to various challenges in the market. There's a really good reason for business agility. Now, what we've considered up to this point is really around cloud automation, but we have taken the word security out of it. Now, if you just look at cloud automation by itself, the challenge comes in that you start to encounter security challenges. So here's a good example of this. There's a bunch of stats on the screen, which I'm not going to read out to you. You're welcome to read those yourselves. But just to give you an indication, when we start to automate things using some of these methods, like, for example, infrastructure as code, like, for example, using DevOps processes with CI tools and all those kind of things, as soon as we start to automate, if we forget about security, then essentially what happens is we actually start to automatically push security holes or misconfigurations into our cloud environments. And I'm sure you've seen there's been a ton of public articles around very severe things that are very basic, public breaches, etc., from simple cloud misconfigurations. And it's all because companies really wanted to move fast and be agile, and so they simply rolled out infrastructure as code, as a typical example, without considering security. And now here's the thing. If we do that, then, and we don't consider security, then essentially we're going to get all these vulnerabilities in our network. Now, I'll point out one or two of the common things. So for example, when you are writing infrastructure as code, whether that be in CloudFormation or Terraform or whatever it is, a lot of the default values essentially are optional. In other words, there are only certain things that are required for you to write an infrastructure as code template. Now, if you do not explicitly define some of these optional values, essentially these languages will just use the defaults. And the defaults, unfortunately, by design are very insecure. So this basically, with you not really even realizing that you need to explicitly define some of these values, you automatically will create a template which is great for automation, which is great for business agility, but leaves you wide open from a security perspective. So a lot of the default configurations in the cloud, in your infrastructure as code, even when you're building applications in terms of microservices applications using technologies like Docker and Kubernetes and things like that, a lot of the defaults on the hosts themselves, in the infrastructure as code language themselves, are literally wide open from a security perspective. So what we need to do if we consider cloud automation with security is we need to consider security when we are considering our cloud automation. Now, here's a practical example. Here what you can see, and I'll just, there's my little laser pointer. So here what you can see is on the left, we've got a team of developers that is writing code or is writing infrastructure as code. And then what they are going to do is once they have written that infrastructure as code, they pass that on to the DevOps team to deploy the infrastructure as code. And finally, that moves into a runtime environment where your infrastructure is actually running on a public cloud provider, for example, one of these three that you see here. Now, if the developers, when they are writing this code, let's assume that they misconfigure a piece of that code and they've got one misconfiguration in that template. They hand that template over to our DevOps team, and that DevOps team reuses this one template 100 times, which results in that misconfiguration spreading across your cloud environment hundreds of times. And that can lead to thousands of security alerts. So one simple misconfiguration at the development stage can result in thousands of misconfigurations at the runtime phase. Now, this is how things scale if you do not essentially look at security, protecting or building security in right at the beginning of your processes. And just to show you how bad this problem really gets, if we look at it from the opposite perspective, normally security teams in companies are really small. So you can see there's only one poor guy here. Now the DevOps team is bigger, so there's 3 of these people, and the development team is even bigger than that. Those are 5 people. So the 5 people have introduced one misconfiguration, but the single person in the security team has to deal with thousands of alerts. So this is very bad from a people perspective because typically your security staff simply just seem to burn out very quickly because of this problem. And then finally, if you consider the cost, if you had fixed the production issue, if you had fixed the issue at the development stage, the cost is significantly smaller than when it gets to the actual production in the runtime within your cloud environment. And this is why when you are automating and creating, spinning up infrastructure in the public cloud, things like that, you need to make sure that you are catching these security issues early on, because it's going to save you in terms of staff churn, and it's also going to save you in terms of actual cost. Okay, so essentially what we're looking for when we're looking at cloud security automation is we want to protect across the development lifecycle. And that basically means, if I go back to the previous slide, we want to protect the cloud from the build phase to the deploy phase to the runtime phase. All 3 of these phases are very important when we think about cloud security automation. This stage is most likely we have to have a holistic view to protect against all 3 of these environments. Of course, there needs to be trust between the DevOps and the security teams in order for this to happen. And this is exactly what DevOps is all about, right? It's all about collaboration between development teams, between our operational teams, and between our security teams. We cannot we can't essentially achieve security in our cloud automation processes unless we're actually working together. And obviously the cloud is constantly changing. So we need to make sure not only are we working together, but that we've got a good view of what's actually happening in our cloud environment. Now, the kind of final slide that I want to present on this concept is this is why Gartner has come up with this brand new acronym, which is right here, over here, CNAPP or CNAP. Now, I don't know, we've got so many acronyms in IT, right? I mean, what's another one, I suppose? But this stands for a Cloud Native Application Protection Platform. And what the key word I want you to come away with there is platform, this last P. Because what Gartner is basically saying is that when it comes to cloud, you actually need a platform that touches all of these three phases. You need a platform that basically is integrated into our development environments. Things like IDE tools, things like source code repositories, which the developers are typically using, things like GitLab and GitHub and those kind of things. We also need the platform to be able to talk to our DevOps teams, which is, tools like your CI tools, Jenkins, Circle CI, all these sort of development DevOps tools. We also need to integrate our security into these kind of tools in order to ensure that we're securing our cloud automation framework. And then finally, at the runtime phase, this is actually when we've pushed that infrastructure as code all the way into the runtime phase, and now we're actually running in things like AWS or Azure or GCP. We need to also monitor this environment too. And that's why they call it a Cloud Native Application Protection Platform, because we actually got to have a platform that covers this entire software development lifecycle. Now, of course, Palo Alto offers a platform like this. We call it Prisma Cloud, and you're welcome to read more about this. But the idea is that it doesn't matter what cloud you're using. So that could be Oracle Cloud, that could be Google, could be AWS, could be Azure, it could even be your private cloud. It doesn't matter what stack you're using. It doesn't matter if you're using just normal virtual machines, or you've evolved into microservices like Docker and Kubernetes, or even serverless functions. And it doesn't even matter what tools you're using from a DevOps perspective or from a developer perspective. The platform needs to touch all of these different use cases in order to essentially protect your cloud automation. So that's what a cloud native application platform is. And with that, I will conclude. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gordon. Next, I invite Amrit from Oracle to present. And again, I ask that the host unmute Amrit's microphone. Thank you.
Taylor, can you confirm if you can hear me loud and clear?
We can hear you now.
All right. And can you confirm if you can see my screen?
We can.
All right, excellent. So thank you very much, Taylor, and thank you also, Gordon, for the presentation. So I'm very delighted to be part of the Mozambique Internet Governance Forum. And I'm here together with my colleague, Tiago, who is the account manager for Mozambique. And before we start, I would like also to thank the authorities, the organizing committee, to give us this opportunity, this platform, to share a bit with you what we are doing in the cloud computing space. And again, to reiterate our commitment and our investment into the Mozambique market, be it in the public sector or in the private sector. So my name is Amrit Nau. I'm leading the technology solutions engineering team for the Middle East and Africa at Oracle. And yeah, we've been traveling to Mozambique since years now, and I'm also happy to see a couple of known people, known customers. So welcome to the session. Now, the topic today is Internet and Cloud Computing, but before I go there, I would like to just mention a few words about our data management story. And I think in the keynote speech, I could also hear the importance of data, which is, our most critical asset in any organizations. Now, you need to be able to manage all these data types that you are using. So today, it's not just about records, but it's also a lot to do about unstructured data, like videos, like images, like IoT data, streaming data. It could be data in its raw format, like geospatial data. It could be blockchain type of data. Okay, so you need to be able to manage all of that into one single data source. So consolidating your data sources into one single database, that will facilitate the transition to the cloud eventually. Okay, so you need to have a not just a scalable but a reliable data source, which is at the heart of any digital transformation or at the heart of any cloud project. So at Oracle, we have the what we call the converged database, the new version of the database, the 19C, where you can store all of these types of data. Whether you are a database administrator, whether you are a developer, whether you are a business person, right? You can make use of the benefits of the Oracle Database 19C, okay, to help you to consolidate and manage your data in a standard way using centralized monitoring tools. Okay. Now, of course, I still recall, and Thiago will also recall that some 6 years back, when the cloud computing was reaching, I would say, the corporate world, the enterprises. So we were in Maputo, we were in Mozambique to educate our user community about cloud computing for enterprises. And I must admit that till now there are some doubts, there are some constraints, and which are normal. Okay, which are normal. We see this also in the region. I've been working in the SADC region for many years, and this is the tendency. Why? So why do enterprises, why do governments hesitate to go to the cloud? Okay, it's because of various reasons. One of them is the latency requirements, okay, or the regulatory requirements. And I think this is a hot subject of discussion today. Okay, so will eventually the Data Protection Act of Mozambique cater for organizations to move their data, to move their workloads to the cloud? So this is one consideration that we need to take into account. The other one is the data sovereignty. Okay, where do the data about citizens, about customers, where can they reside? Is it inside the country or outside the country? And then, of course, there's the fear or the apprehension that having all the data in one single place in a data center somewhere, right, could lead to vulnerabilities in physical security. So these are natural, logical questions, and that you may be asking, that many of our customers in Mozambique have been asking. And slowly and gradually, they are getting to understand that the move to the cloud, okay, it's not something that you can do overnight. It requires a lot of preparation. Why? Because those data, okay, has an impact where they reside, has an impact also on the application. It also has an impact on the human resources that you are deploying. And we will see what are the impacts that will have during the course of the presentation. Now, the good thing is that at Oracle, we offer you the choice, okay? And we can also offer you a roadmap to make that transition. So first of all, we have observed that many organizations today, even including the government, the public sector, right, they want to have their data on-premise in their data center, okay, where they can have full management and full control, okay. So that could be an example of a private cloud, okay? And to build a private cloud in your data center, okay, you have today all the hardware, all the software, and all the middleware and the management tools, okay, to allow you to build and manage your own data center, okay? And you can also have the public cloud on the other side, okay, where all your data are residing into one of our public clouds, which are spread around the world, okay. And then we have other machines, other models of cloud computing, which are not yet available in the region. Hopefully they will come soon. This is what we call cloud at customer. So this is basically the same model that you have on public cloud. You have the same environment, the same infrastructure at your data center, which is owned and managed by Oracle, okay? And then we have one of the latest, I would say, innovations, which we call the OCI Roving Edge. Again, not yet available in our region, but just for you to know that you can run this kind of cloud computing anywhere, especially in remote areas where you don't have connection. It could be, I don't know, for some research project, maybe in the forest somewhere, or it could be in remote branches, in small villages where you don't have a stable electricity supply, or where you don't have even internet connection, okay? So these are the different models of cloud computing that we have. So to expand this a little bit more, as I said before, it is a spectrum, okay? On one side, you can create your own cloud, which is, let's say we call it a private cloud, okay? And on the other side of the spectrum, we have the public cloud, which is all managed by Oracle. And you can also, depending on the maturity of your infrastructure and your people, you can compromise on something in between, where you have both a private cloud and part of your workloads are on public cloud. And this is what we call the hybrid cloud computing. So the good news is that with Oracle, you have the flexibility of putting up an environment and putting up the different building blocks to build your own cloud model, okay? So in the interest of time, I won't be able to go into the details of each one of them, but I hope I some assurance that, okay, this is something that can be done, okay? And the previous speakers laid a lot of emphasis on security. So at Oracle, of course, we take security very, very seriously. Actually, I will also talk about the design principles. Security is something inbuilt in both our hardware and our software. Okay, it's inbuilt. It's always on. We don't compromise on security. One other consideration that you need to take into account before you embark on a cloud journey is the compatibility of that data management product. What I mean to say here is many organizations, okay, they have one type of, let's say, database, But when they move that to the cloud, it's not necessarily the same database that they have there. Okay. So this can create, and we have seen many customers who have failed their implementation or their migration to the cloud. Why? Because they had to recompile all their codes, they had to change all the versions of their application. And in many cases, we have seen that customers had to rebuild the application, okay, because of dependency issues. Most of the products that we have on the market, they claim that they have the same database on-premise and on the cloud, but actually this is not the case. So with the Oracle 19c, you get the same version of the Oracle in your data center and the same Oracle database in the public cloud, so that when you have to migrate, move from on-premise to the cloud, okay, it's the same database, there is no compatibility issue, you can port your application and start to run it there. And speaking about that migration to the cloud, I know we have many organizations, many people sitting with us today who have already invested into their licensors in their data center, okay? So, but moving to the cloud, okay, what do they do with that investment? Okay, do they have just to scrap it, or can they leverage that investment and upgrade also the licensors to the cloud? So this is also possible with Oracle. We have what we call the bring your own license to cloud, okay, where you don't have to pay everything from scratch, reinvest again when you are moving to a cloud model. Okay. Of course, there are various technologies that can allow you to do that migration to the cloud. It's a bit technical. I won't go into this, right? So now speaking about the cloud infrastructure itself, today we have, of course, the Oracle Cloud applications. So if you need an HR or if you need a finance system or even a customer experience system, you can subscribe directly to the Oracle applications, which are on the cloud. Or what you can do is also, if you have any application built that you are running, it could be a revenue authority application, it could be a supply chain application that you have been using and developed on any other technology, any other platform, you can just lift and shift that application as it is on our Oracle Cloud infrastructure, okay? That is also something that many of our customers are doing, and this is the, let's say, the first easier step to do, okay? And of course, one of the reasons to move to the cloud, I think it has been mentioned by Gordon as well on previous speakers, is a reduction in cost, in operational cost, okay? And a reduction in the capital expenditure, okay? You subscribe to the services and you pay only for what you are using, okay? And we are very pleased also to announce that we are increasing our data center around the world, and latest will be in Johannesburg fully this month, so in November 2021. So you will have a data center which is, I don't know, maybe 900 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers away from Maputo, right? That you can leverage and start to make use of, or even start to test with your non-mission critical applications, right? We will come back to that after the launch, and it's going to be the first one on our continent. Yeah, I mentioned also about the Oracle's security principles. So at Oracle, we have an approach to security. We keep it simple, so it's always on. Security posture. This is the approach that we use. So the easy defaults for developing and running applications. It's prescriptives, right? It gives you recipes to enforce security posture, automated baseline management, And I'm happy to announce that also today you can benefit from Oracle's free offer to run security assessment of your environment, where we can give you a report about what are the vulnerabilities or what are the open doors that you have forgotten to lock in your environment. So if you are interested, you can get back to me or my colleague Thiago. So sorry, we're doing a little bit of marketing here, but I think it's very, very important to understand where your current, what is your current security posture. Yeah, so I think I mentioned this before. At all levels in our public cloud, we have all those security controls, be it at the data where it is at rest, be it at the compute level, the networking, the monitoring and prevention, and also at the internet and edge level, at the endpoint. So we secure the data, okay, from the source, okay, till the end. So if someone needs to break into those data and breach or compromise your data, they will have to break all these different layers before they reach your data in the database. This is what we call a defense in depth approach, right? Which is very, very foolproof. And you can imagine the amount of resources that a hacker will need to put in, right, to break all these different walls and reach your data. So some design principles before I complete. We implement what we call zero trust security. That is, we disable access to everything and we give access to those who are authorized to access the data. We have advanced network architecture, massively scalable compute. So you can start small, right? Whether you are a small organization or whether you are a big government, right? You can scale in, scale out on demand. We have what we call an AI and machine learning based automation. Okay, so these are inbuilt into our database, right? And the middleware layer as well. You have high performance storage, and very important, you have a comprehensive service level agreement, and in terms of performance, in terms of availability, and in terms of management. So we are one of the rare vendors who can provide you these SLAs while you sign up for your cloud contract, and it is on paper, okay? And of course, we have a huge support ecosystem for enterprise technology. Most important thing is that moving to the Oracle Cloud, okay, you are already complying to not just the global regulations, but also to any, let's say, government or any industry or even regional regulations like the GDPR, for instance. So our cloud platform is certified over all these regulations. So that's it from me. I hope I've been able to give you some insights about the journey to the cloud and how you can use Oracle and you can use our data management strategy with a foolproof security to manage your most important asset of your organization, which is your data. Thank you very much. I would welcome any questions that is there on the chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please again, if I took a little bit of time.
Thank you very much, Emma. And finally, I would like to ask Dr. Mungwanaze to present to the forum. And again, if the host could please unmute Dr. Mungwanaze. Thanks.
Maybe you want to stop sharing your screen, camera.
Boa tarde. sou Marcelo Munguanazi, trabalho há alguns anos. Na universidade. Pode passar a apresentação, por favor? Obrigado. Sim, dizia, sou Marcelo Munguanazi, trabalho há alguns 24 anos na universidade. Entrei numa altura em que se discutia a internet em Moçambique. Passei alguns momentos e hoje gostaria de falar sobre, sim, a internet e igualmente a computação em nuvem. Como se disse aqui, somos exigidos a nos mover do ponto onde estávamos para algures que permite uma melhor percepção e desempenho das nossas atividades. Deve haver uma contribuição que as academias podem prestar nesta grande tarefa. Então vim aqui apresentar aquilo que as academias e a UEM em particular está a fazer no sentido de dar resposta aos desafios deste grande tópico que hoje estamos a debater. Não vou definir internet nem computação na nuvem, porque aqui estamos especialistas desta matéria. E ainda, noutras sessões, os oradores que me precederam abordaram alguns elementos disto. Aquela fonte destaca alguns elementos ligados à aplicação, plataforma, infraestrutura também, como constituintes deste grande tópico que é nuvem. Agora, nós queremos, e conforme está dito no tópico de hoje, né, queremos discutir os desafios da criação de soluções de computação em nuvem e o desenvolvimento de competências técnicas dos profissionais. É que, na verdade, a todos os níveis, a nível de infraestrutura, a nível de plataformas, encontramos desafios específicos e eles devem ser mitigados convenientemente. O nosso foco é a pessoa humana, é o técnico de informática que pensamos que tem que ser capacitado para, digamos, desenvolver ações com todo o profissionalismo. Então, queremos aqui apresentar a contribuição da academia na resposta dos desafios da criação de competências técnicas dos profissionais de TICs em especial. As academias, onde a UEM se encontra, criam um ecossistema de aprendizagem. Acima de tudo, precisamos de investigação na área tecnológica, capaz de responder aos desafios que não enumerei, mas podemos discutir, por exemplo, o acesso à internet, a própria capacitação de técnicos, são desafios que devem ser resolvidos a contento. Então, nós, academia, temos uma grande responsabilidade na questão de formação dos especialistas. Então, a nível da UEM, estamos a trabalhar em cerca de 4 academias. Um pouco antes, trabalhamos com a Academia Microsoft, iniciamos contactos com a Academia Oracle e agora temos estas 4 academias, digamos, em operação. Nos slides seguintes, eu vou descrever cada uma dessas academias. Aqui a perspectiva é que a academia, a OIM, oferece um espaço onde podemos discutir os desafios em pormenor, podemos capacitar os técnicos, e estão aqui algumas possibilidades de capacitação para podermos levarmos a bom termo esta necessidade de, como Moçambique, também utilizarmos serviços da Nuvem. Começaria pela academia da Cisco. Na OIM já corremos esta academia há mais de 15 anos, já capacitamos um pouco mais do que 2.000 técnicos. Ela é especializada, treina técnicos na área de redes. O profissional pode encontrar várias saídas do básico ao profissional, não é? Desde IT Essential, e pode também optar por cursos a nível de infraestrutura, CCNA 1, CCNA 2, por aí em diante, e depois algumas as certificações específicas chamadas CCNP. A Cisco também oferece capacitação na área de infraestrutura de redes e ainda na área de cibersegurança. Estes tópicos, segurança de infraestrutura, então, me parece que aqui é o prato forte para, ou quando falamos são aspectos muito importantes, quando falamos de computação em nuvem. Então, estamos a dizer que a academia está desempenhando o seu papel, está criou algumas condições, está melhorando os processos para a capacitação de profissionais a nível nacional. Temos também a academia Huawei. Aqui ainda não temos treinados, ainda estamos no primeiríssimo curso. Há uma chamada já em curso e o participante tem a possibilidade neste momento, tem a possibilidade de se candidatar ao curso de HCI Datacom. Isto porque estamos na fase inicial, temos alguns poucos instrutores credenciados. Então não podemos abarcar a todas as áreas, a todos os módulos desta formação. Igualmente, organizamos-nos para intervir na Academia de Cibersegurança da Palo Alto. Aqui, igualmente, estamos no primeiríssimo módulo, no primeiríssimo ano de trabalhos. Ainda não capacitamos técnicos, mas internamente, para além de capacitar os instrutores, promovemos um curso piloto ao pessoal técnico da universidade, e agora temos uma chamada para, em breve, próximo mês, iniciar esta capacitação em cibersegurança da Palo Alto. Este slide mostra o desafio que estas capacitações colocam. É preciso algum tempo, as instituições precisam de planificar os seus recursos humanos, precisam de dar oportunidade sim aos técnicos para eles frequentarem os cursos do básico ao profissional. Igualmente, estamos em acreditação a nível da OIM, estamos em acreditação na Academia AWS da Amazon. Então, pensamos que dentro de 3 ou 4 meses estaremos também a capacitar técnicos nesta área. Os módulos específicos são vários, mas aqui listamos alguns. Portanto, são oportunidades que a Universidade Eduardo Mondlane e igualmente outras academias, outras universidades aqui a nível nacional, oferece para a capacitação de técnicos que são muito importantes para este trabalho de migração, de onde estamos para uma melhor situação do amanhã. Certo, nós não quisemos descrever uma tecnologia específica, que viemos dizer, afinal de contas, há um trabalho interno a nível das academias que pode ser aproveitado para a capacitação, a formação de técnicos. Há um espaço que pode ser explorado para todos os setores capacitar os seus técnicos, são as academias, e não quisemos sequer falar da formação a nível de graduação. Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mangwanaza. Next, we'll move into the question and answer portion of today's program. I think for the first question, I'd like to direct to Gordon and Emrith. Challenges in creating policies, technologies, and controls that strengthen the overall security posture to protect data, applications, and infrastructure against possible threats in the cloud. It's a rather big question. So thank you both for your responses. I think to start, Gordon?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Taylor. So, I mean, when it comes to security posture in the cloud, the first thing is that we need to gain some sort of visibility. So we need to gain visibility of, for example, all the assets in the cloud, everything that the customer is using from a workload perspective. And then not only that, we don't want to just look at the workloads themselves, but we also want to look at the traffic that's going to and from those workloads. So we've got to actually consider things like flow logs, network flow logs, VPC flow logs, and things like that. We want to have a holistic view, not only of what you have in the public cloud, but also of what's interacting with your public cloud, both from a private networking as well as a public networking perspective. So once we gain that visibility, then we can look at things like what are those, how are those workloads configured from a security best practices point of view? And obviously that ties into compliance, and I'm sure that Emrith will probably chat to you a little bit more about compliance as well. But essentially, we want to see how those workloads are configured. Are they configured as per best practices? And then map that to compliance framework so that you can essentially track your compliance over time, because obviously the cloud is continuously evolving. So those are some of the challenges. Those are some things that you have to do. The challenge comes in, especially for a lot of customers, when you consider that they start to use multi-cloud environments. So a lot of customers that I speak to are using not just a single cloud provider, or they've got a hybrid sort of cloud infrastructure where they're using on-prem as well as public cloud, maybe on-prem as well as multi-public cloud as well. And then how do you do that in a consistent way? So yeah, that would be some of the challenges. Over to you, Emrith. If you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, could the host please unmute Emrith?
Senhor Eduardo Nhasengo, que levantou o braço, acho que pode colocar a sua questão. Vejo que o senhor Eduardo Nhasengo levantou o braço. Oh, ok. Nós temos aqui na sala.
Sorry, we're still waiting on Emrith's microphone to be unmuted.
Okay, hold on a second, please.
Thanks.
Boa tarde a todos. Eu queria falar, mas eu não sou o Ricardo. Não sou o Ricardo Nhansego. Posso? Obrigado. Meu nome é Mickson dos Milagres, eu sou gestor de programas de desenvolvimento. Eu sou gestor de programas de desenvolvimento institucional da Rede da Criança, uma ONG que trabalha em Moçambique. Portanto, eu queria primeiro felicitar o Instituto das Tecnologias de Comunicação e Informação por este evento, pela forma didática como foi o processo até chegar a este nível. Eu pude acompanhar isto mesmo através das tecnologias de informação e comunicação. Agora, é preciso referir que, como disse o último orador, eu particularmente não sou especialista em TICs e não sou especialista em internet de forma particular. Sou um servidor das camadas pobres, das camadas vulneráveis do nosso país, a quem o lema deste fórum particularmente mexeu com elas, que é acessibilidade e inclusão. Sinto-me deficiente, na verdade, durante as abordagens que vão sendo feitas. Termos como nuvem, protocolo público, automação, para mim também são novidades. Então, eu sou deficiente também em relação a isto. Quer dizer que eu sou parte das pessoas que estão excluídas neste processo, que precisa de libertar-se desta deficiência. Ainda bem que a minha deficiência não é eterna. É uma que, com este trabalho, pode, em algum momento, minimizar. Durante estas intervenções todas, ficou-me a percepção de um avanço da internet e das TICs, e pode ser um engano meu, na perspectiva comercial da coisa. Mas eu quero voltar a chamar a atenção que há impactos diretos da Covid-19 no nosso país, há impactos diretos dos conflitos armados e há impactos diretos dos desastres naturais, e que eu pensei, salvo esteja eu enganado, que as TICs, a internet de forma particular, pode ser uma solução. Mas agora, então, é meu sonho também garantir que esta solução venha o mais breve possível. Daí que eu queria só trazer 3 questões básicas. Primeiro, como é que podemos garantir que nossas crianças não continuem privadas do direito à educação através das TICs no contexto das múltiplas crises? Porque o que assistimos foi um retrocesso nos ganhos que nós, como sociedade civil, como governo e como parceiros do governo, fizeram durante muito tempo quando a Covid chegou. Vimos o direito à educação particularmente ficar algo esquisito no meio das crianças dos 6 aos 12 anos de idade. E não tínhamos uma outra alternativa porque éramos nós, sociedade civil, particularmente analfabetos em termos digitais, em termos de literacia digital, em termos de inclusão, etc. Outra questão minha é como é que podemos assegurar que as nossas crianças não sejam vítimas de exploração sexual com este crescimento da internet. Nós assistimos a um uso quase que voluntário. Até dissemos que as nossas crianças estão mais inteligentes que nós no uso da internet, mas no final do dia percebemos que o uso não é tão como é que posso dizer, uso o termo, não é tão maduro assim como devia ser. É um uso descontrolado, desmonitorizado, que no final do dia pode abrir espaço para cadeias de oportunistas, para privação de direito, para abuso e outros, negligência e outros aspectos. Por fim, a minha última questão seria também como é que podemos garantir uma monitoria da proteção da criança neste processo de segurança cibernética que se aqui fala. E também enquanto garantimos que a digitalização avance e haja inclusão de gente como nós. Obrigado.
So Taylor, over to you to decide who can take 1 or 2 questions. Sorry, who can answer 1 or 2 questions on those ones that have been posted here. Over to you. You're driving the panel.
I appreciate it. I would like to give Amrit a chance to answer the question that I originally posed. Would it be possible to unmute him?
All right. I think I've been unmuted. Yeah. Okay. So, if I noted your question well, it was about the overall security posture, right? I think I agree with Gordon. We need to first have like an asset inventory and see what are the sensitive data, what are those data that you need to protect, because obviously you need not protect everything, okay, because that can come with a cost. I would also add that we need to identify the vulnerabilities. Here I'm talking not just about the public cloud, but I'm also talking about the private cloud. So the advantages or disadvantages of each private and public cloud, well, we need to strike the right balance. If you are talking about the public cloud, okay, well, I'm speaking, of course, on behalf of Oracle. In our data center, all the security controls are in place. When you sign up, it comes together, right? The security of your the network, the infrastructure, right? They come by default. But if you have to implement your own data center in your server room or even, let's say, at the government level, then you need to put up all these controls by yourselves, okay? And in doing that, you need to have a proper approach to tackling security. And at Oracle, we prescribe what we call the defense in depth that I've just described in my presentation, where you can have not just the administrative tools, but also the defensive and preventive tools to protect your information. And well, of course, we have a portfolio of products like Audit Vault, Database Vault, encryption, data masking. Well, there's a whole list of these security products. But I think apart from the products, apart from the technology, you also need to start thinking about your own, let's say, organization structure. You will see nowadays many organizations have created new positions. We have, for instance, a chief security officer, right? Or other designations, new designations around security. So it's just to say that you need to have what we call the segregation of duties. IT is no longer the custodian of the data, right? It's the business user. So why not have another team who looks only after security, okay? And of course, another thing that I mentioned is to take into account all the local or the industry or your own company's regulations when you want to adopt a certain security posture. Let's say if you are a bank or a financial institution dealing with credit card information or confidential customer information, then you will have to abide to certain regulations pertaining to the financial services industry. So it's not just protecting your data, but also protecting the business, protecting the image of the business you are running. I think it goes beyond technology. It has to do with the people, with the structure, and also with all the regulations that come around. Yes.
Thank you, Emma. The next question I'd like to direct to Dr. Mangwanaza and Amrit again. What are the challenges to creating cloud computing solutions and developing the professional technical skills to implement them? Amrit, perhaps you could go first this time.
Yes, so of course, building a cloud computing solution, it's not something that can come easy. You will have to have trained people, right, to understand, especially the framework of cloud computing. Luckily, there are many vendors on the market who can provide foolproof solutions to cloud. Okay, but I think we also need to, it's a new field, and we also need to have trained or certified people who can work on these kinds of solutions. I know even at all we have lots of more rapid application on top of the database that can easily allow your developers, your technical people to develop applications and deploy on the cloud without writing too much code. Okay, so I think if you have developers or people who can do programming, right, you have today a large number of the developer community, okay, who can benefit from those rapid application tools to deploy applications on the cloud. And we also have lots of frameworks also to convert applications and make them become cloud ready, okay? Or we also have tools, what we call the native cloud tools that can allow developers to easily use their current skills, okay, to convert to the cloud. Now, it's good also to mention that if, let's say tomorrow, you want to develop any organization, anyone in here in this event, you want to pilot, to develop a prototype using cloud technologies, okay, so we can also put at your disposal engineers that can work with you, okay, to develop these prototypes, and also to at the same time do like a transfer of the technology, right, to your own technical people. So yes, I mean these possibilities exist today. We have done it in other countries, developing prototypes together, and then once they start using it, the organizations themselves, they can take over and continue with applications. Yeah.
Thank you. And Dr. Magwanaga.
Connecting him in 30 seconds. Connected. Sim, neste ponto posso adicionar provavelmente dois outros desafios. Tipicamente os investimentos iniciais são bastante altos para as organizações. Apesar de, após o investimento, diminuírem os custos substancialmente. Então, por aqui podemos ver claramente que precisamos de ter estratégia própria para podermos fazer face aos investimentos necessários, mobilizar investimentos necessários para o acesso à nuvem. Nesse processo, também queria destacar a existência de estratégia clara, a nível das organizações, para levar este processo a bom porto. Nesta matéria, iria elogiar o INTIC por esta conferência, quer dizer, faz parte de uma estratégia para a massificação dos serviços de internet ao organizar esta conferência. Então, individualmente as organizações também precisam de ter formas próprias de introduzir os serviços de internet. A partir da própria capacitação, temos que ter até a aquisição de equipamento, configurações, para podermos aceder aos serviços que precisamos. Talvez ia também referir uma questão que é característica para o nosso país. A realidade mostra que ou não temos sistemas, ou então os sistemas são obsoletos de alguma maneira. Então, se vamos à net, vamos ter um manancial de possibilidades. Em algum momento precisamos de integrar o que vamos buscar na net com os sistemas legados que temos. Este também pode ser um grande desafio para podermos conseguir, digamos, aproveitar mesmo as facilidades que temos na internet. Muito obrigado.
Thank you, Dr. Mungonaza. And with apologies to the attendees in the chat, we've run out of time. So I have one last question as we close out to Gordon and Amrit. To wrap up, please share some best practices regarding cloud automation for deploying into public clouds, particularly from a security perspective.
Sure, thanks, Taylor. So I'll be fairly brief around this. I mean, we spoke a little bit about it in my presentation, but from a best practices point of view, when you're automating and you are using, for example, an infrastructure as code language, something like Terraform, which is quite a good one to use because it's obviously cloud agnostic. The key thing is that we need to be scanning those infrastructure as code templates in order to make sure that they are compliant from a security best practices point of view. Now, practically speaking, how do you do that? One of the best ways to do that is to use a tool that's going to natively integrate into the developer's environment. So, for example, if he uses like an IDE, something like Visual Studio Code to actually write the infrastructure as code in, then what happens is that you integrate using a plugin directly into his IDE. And why is that a best practice? It's a best practice because the developer gets instant feedback as to why his code is insecure in the tool that he is already familiar with. So he's already familiar with a tool like Visual Studio Code, or he's familiar with a source code repository, something like GitHub. If we can, from a security perspective, provide him feedback directly in his own tooling that he's familiar with, it means he doesn't have to navigate to a different console, something he's not familiar with, in order to actually fix his code from a security perspective. So best practices, of course, it's going to be scan your infrastructure as code. But in practice, how do you get that right? How do you actually make that effective in your organization? The way to do that is to actually integrate into the developer's native tooling. Integrate into the likes of GitHub, into the likes of Visual Studio Code, into the DevOps tooling, and that way you'll actually become effective because developers will start to love security because you're basically baking security into their own native tooling. I'll hand over to Amrit.
Yeah, thank you, Gordon. I think maybe before that, I would say the choice of the public cloud is very important, especially when it comes to security. You need to ensure that you have a cloud which has got a fault-tolerant infrastructure, a cloud which has got, for instance, network segmentation, a cloud with physical network to start with, where we have isolated network virtualization, and a cloud that comes already with some platform security. And then coming to some of the best practices, I think, Gordon, you mentioned that, well, at Oracle, we also use Terraform. Okay, many of our cloud developers, they use Terraforms to replicate environments or instances of cloud on different regions. Yeah, and then we have other tools as well that that you can use. So having a standard tool and a standard way of proceeding with all the documentation, that is also very important, because what we see is that many times a new developer will come, that person will use his or her own scripts or her own framework, and then when that person leaves, the other persons who are taking over, they do not have any idea. There's no documentation, and they don't know how to maintain those codes. So it's very important that you, as an organization, you have a standard way and standard tools, okay, to develop or to deploy and automate your cloud environment. Something which is very important also is to have technologies that can provide you reports or trigger alerts whenever something is going wrong, right? So that also is very important, because you don't have to wait until the damage is caused so that you can take the corrective measures. So if you can get real-time alerts or real-time analytics about the status of your environment, that can help you become more proactive.
Thank you. And with that, I believe we conclude today's session. Thank you to the panelists for their participation and to the ministry for hosting today's forum.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Termina desta feita este painel, esta sessão. Estamos conscientes de que ficaram perguntas por responder, mas estamos um pouco também em cima do tempo e queremos acreditar que estas questões que ficaram por responder serão a qualquer momento respondidas noutras sessões ou noutros painéis, e queremos pedir desculpas a todos que terão colocado perguntas e que não foram respondidas. Garantidamente a sessão vai até sexta-feira e procuraremos uma forma de responder. Vamos fazer um brevíssimo intervalo de mesmo 5 minutos para esticar as pernas, esticar um pouco a coluna, tomar ali um café. Em 5 minutos voltamos para ter um vídeo da BDQ, um vídeo de 15 a 20 minutos de BDQ, e depois desse vídeo vamos passar para o terceiro e último painel, que vai falar sobre acesso à informação na internet. Vamos fazer intervalo de 5 minutos, esticamos um bocadinho as pernas, tomamos um café, retornamos em 5 minutos para entrar no painel sobre acesso à informação na internet. Todas as questões que não foram respondidas estão pelo menos registadas e encontraremos uma forma de, durante o fórum, poder dizer alguma coisa. Obrigado, boa tarde. senhoras e senhores convidados, estamos no primeiro dia de 3 dias do Fórum de Governação da Internet para uma internet acessível e inclusiva. Esta é uma conferência que está a acontecer com presença de alguns participantes aqui na sala. Queríamos ter mais, mas pelas imposições que todos nós conhecemos, não conseguimos. Entretanto, decorre também de forma híbrida e muitos dos nossos irmãos, e não só, têm estado a acompanhar esta sessão virtualmente, a quem nós queremos agradecer pela paciência. Depois destes 5, 7 minutos de intervalo, vamos retomar a sessão e passo a chamar aqui para o pódio o senhor Belmiro Kive. Ele é o PCA da BDQ. BDQ é uma das grandes empresas que também está a apoiar este evento, mas não só se limita a apoiar o evento Fórum de Governação de Internet, tem estado em várias frentes tecnológicas. Queria pedir então ao Dr. Belmiro Kive para também dizer-nos alguma coisa sobre a BDQ, sobre a Aqui Paga, mas sobre outras coisas, iniciativas que têm vindo a acontecer.
Boa tarde. Em primeiro lugar, quero agradecer a oportunidade que me dão de poder estar aqui nesta plateia de luxo, gente de tecnologia, e que tenho muito que aprender com elas. E também dar os parabéns ao Ministério pelo facto de estar a realizar esta cerimónia, que traz um tema atual, pertinente, e que temos muito que aproveitar para aquilo que são os desafios do país. Eu chamo-me Belmiro Kive,